I did not want to bring this before you, but I could not stay silent. Then say what you came to say. I have work to finish. The royal bracelet from the treasury. It was found in your basket. I did not put it there. You little thief! Get out of this palace!
Her name was Adaeze. For 3 years she had swept those floors, kept her head straight, and never taken a thing that was not hers. But the truth in Odumare did not always speak first, and the lie had already walked out the gate ahead of her. The kingdom of Odumare did not wake slowly. It woke all at once. The moment the sun cleared the edge of the eastern hills, the compound gates opened. The market women called out to each other across the paths. The smell of palm oil and smoked fish moved through the air like something alive. Children ran between the legs of elders who pretended not to notice. And somewhere deep inside the palace walls, before any of that had begun, Adaeze was already working. That was the thing people in Odumare said about her. Not that she was beautiful, though she was. Not that she was quiet, though she rarely raised her voice. What people said about Adaeze was this: she was the kind of woman who finished her work before anyone thought to ask for it. Every morning before the palace cooks had lit their fires, Adaeze had already swept the long corridor that led from the inner chambers to the great hall. She swept it twice, once to clear it, once to make it right. The other palace girls sometimes asked her why she bothered. The elders never walked that corridor before midday. No one would notice. Adaeze would look at them and say nothing. She would just sweep again. She had come to the palace of Odumare 3 years before this story reaches its turning point. Her mother had brought her. A widow with 3 younger children and no land left to farm, her mother had stood at the outer gate with her hands folded and asked, quietly, if there was work for a strong girl who did not complain. Mama Equime, who kept the household stores, and had seen enough girls come and go to know the difference, had looked at Adaeze for a long moment. Then she had said yes. Adaeze never forgot what her mother said to her before she left. "You are going into a place where people will test you," her mother said. "Not because you did anything wrong, because you are there and they can. Keep your back straight, keep your mouth clean, and never let them see you bend." Adaeze had kept those words the way some people kept a piece of cloth from someone they loved, folded, close, brought out only when needed. Life inside the palace was not cruel in the way people outside imagined it. It was not beatings or locked rooms. It was smaller than that. It was the way a senior palace girl would call your name from across the courtyard so that everyone heard, not to speak to you, but to make you walk to her. It was the way food portions were distributed, and somehow yours was always less. It was the way certain women looked at you when the palace's young lord passed through a room and his eyes moved just briefly, just once in your direction. Adaeze had learned to read all of it without reacting to any of it. She was not cold. People who did not know her thought she was cold. Mama Equime knew better. In the evenings, when the work was done and the other girls had gone to sleep, Adaeze would sometimes sit outside the storage room and look up at the sky. Not thinking, just looking. Mama Equime would bring her a small bowl of pepper soup and sit beside her without speaking, and they would share the silence the way old friends share a meal. "You carry too much alone," Mama Equime told her once. "There is no one else to carry it," Adaeze replied. Mama Equime had looked at her with something that was not quite pity and not quite admiration. Something in between the two. Now, there is one thing about Adaeze that must be said before this story moves forward. She had a secret, not a hidden identity, not a royal bloodline about to be revealed. Her secret was simpler and heavier than that. She had allowed herself to feel something she had no right to feel, not loudly, not recklessly. In the way that water finds a crack in stone quietly, without announcing itself, until one day you look and the crack has become something that cannot be closed. She had not meant for it to happen. She was not the kind of woman who dreamed of palaces when she already lived in one. She was not the kind of woman who looked at a man's title and saw a door. But Emeka was not a title to her. He was a presence. And presence, when you are around it long enough, becomes something your body remembers before your mind can stop it. She had never spoken of it. Not to Mama Ekwime, not to the one girl in the palace quarters she sometimes called a friend. She buried it the way her mother had taught her to bury things that could only hurt her. Deep, clean, without ceremony. And for a while, it stayed buried. The trouble began, as trouble in palaces often does, with an arrival. Her name was Ngozi, daughter of Chief Elder Ikena, the most powerful elder outside the royal family. She came to the palace of Odumare on a dry season morning, when the air tasted of dust and the harmattan had stripped the leaves from the neem trees along the outer wall. She arrived with 6 attendants, 3 chests of cloth, and the kind of certainty that comes not from confidence but from calculation. She had been told by her father, by her mother, by every elder who had sat at their table, that this marriage was already decided, that Emeka was already hers, that what remained was simply the formality of being seen. Adaeze was sweeping the corridor when Ngozi's procession passed through the main gate. She stepped aside. She did not look up, but she heard Ngozi's voice, clear, carrying. The voice of a woman who had never once been asked to lower it. And something in Adaeze's chest, something she had buried deep and clean and without ceremony, shifted. She pressed it back down. She kept sweeping. Ngozi saw everything in a palace the way a general sees a battlefield, not to admire it, to understand what could be used and what needed to be removed. She had been in the palace of Odumare for 3 days before she noticed Adaeze. Or rather, before she noticed the way Emeka's attention moved when Adaeze was in a room. It was nothing obvious. Emeka was not a man who was obvious. He did not call out to her or single her out in company. But Ngozi had spent her whole life watching her father in council rooms, learning to read the thing behind the thing. And what she read in Emeka was this: he knew where Adaeze was in every room without looking for her. That was enough. Ngozi did not panic. She did not rage. She sat with what she had seen the way her father sat, with information that needed to be handled carefully. She thought about it for one night. By morning, she had decided. The gold bracelet belonged to the palace treasury. It was an old piece, worn at formal occasions by senior household women. It had no extraordinary value except that it was recognizable. Every elder in Odumare knew that bracelet. Every servant in the palace knew whose stores it came from. It was Mama Ekwime's responsibility. Ngozi did not steal it herself. She had her most trusted attendant take it from the storage room during the midday hour when Mama Ekwime rested. And she had the same attendant place it at the bottom of Adaeze's work basket, beneath the folded fur cloths Adaeze used for corridor cleaning. She waited 2 more days. Then, on the morning of the 3rd day, she walked into the inner courtyard, where Emeka was meeting with 2 junior elders, and she said, loudly enough for the courtyard guard to hear, that she needed to speak to the household lord about a matter of theft. Adaeze was cold. She came without being told why. She walked into the inner courtyard with her back straight and her hands at her sides, and she saw Ngozi standing near the carved wooden pillar with her arms folded and her chin raised, and she understood in the space of one breath what was happening. Ngozi's attendant stepped forward and described what she had seen. She spoke carefully and without rushing. She named the day. She named the hour. She described Adaeze bending over the stores while Mama Ekwime was not present. She was lying with the fluency of someone who had rehearsed. "Search her basket," Ngozi said, not to Emeka, to the guard. The guard looked at Emeka. Emeka said nothing. The guard searched the basket. The gold bracelet was there. The courtyard went still in the way that courtyards go still when something has happened that everyone will remember. The 2 junior elders looked at each other. The guard held the bracelet up in the light. Ngozi's expression did not change it. had been arranged into something that looked like reluctant sadness. Adaeze looked at the bracelet. Then she looked at Emeka. He was already looking at her. This was the moment. This was the moment that everyone who was there would describe differently for the rest of their lives, depending on who they had been loyal to. Some would say Emeka looked uncertain. Some would say he looked cold. Some would say he looked like a man who wanted to say something and did not know how. What no one disputed was this: he said nothing. Adaeze held his gaze for 3 full seconds, long enough that it was not accidental, long enough that it was a question, asked without words and answered without words. Then she looked away. "I did not take it," she said. Her voice was level, not angry, not pleading. "The way you state a fact about the weather." Ngozi tilted her head. "Then how did it come to be in your basket?" she asked. Adaeze did not answer. Not because she had no answer, but because she understood, with complete clarity, that no answer she gave in that courtyard would be believed. The bracelet was in her basket. Ngozi's attendant had given testimony. The elders were present, and Emeka, the one person whose word could have ended it, was silent. She had nothing left to defend herself with except her silence, and her silence, at least, was hers. "Remove her from the palace grounds," one of the junior elders said. No one disagreed. Adaeze did not look at Emeka again. She walked out of the inner courtyard the same way she had walked in, back straight. Hands at her sides, coral beads at her throat. She did not cry until she was past the outer gate and the sound of Odumare Palace was behind her. And even then, she cried walking. She did not stop moving. To understand what Emeka did next, you have to understand what Emeka was doing in that part of the palace on the morning Ngozi arrived. He was not there by coincidence. For 4 months before Ngozi's arrival, Emeka had been conducting a quiet investigation into the disappearance of palace resources. Grain from the stores, cloth from the treasury. Small amounts, taken carefully, in the kind of pattern that only became visible if you were specifically looking for it. His father, the king, did not know. Emeka had decided not to tell him until he had something certain, because the person he suspected was connected to one of the senior elder families, and an accusation without proof in Odumare was a wound that did not heal cleanly. He had positioned himself near the household stores. He had told no one. He had spent 3 weeks moving through parts of the palace that a man of his position had no obvious reason to visit, and in doing so he had become, without intending to, a presence in Adaeze's daily world. He had watched her work, not following her, not seeking her out, but present enough, repeatedly, that he had built a picture of her, the way you build a picture of someone without meaning to, through accumulated small observations that suddenly, one day, amount to something. He had noticed the way she swept the corridor twice. He had noticed the way she settled disputes between the junior palace girls without raising her voice, without taking sides, in a way that left both of them feeling they had been heard. He had noticed the single strand of coral beads she wore every day, regardless of what she was doing, and he had thought, without analyzing the thought, that it was the most dignified thing he had seen in a long time. He had not spoken to her directly, not because he was avoiding it, because he was, without fully admitting it to himself, afraid of what would happen to the thing he was watching if he introduced himself into it. There are things that exist cleanly at a distance and become complicated up close, and Emeka, who was a careful man, was not ready to make it complicated. Then Ngozi arrived, and everything he had been careful about stopped mattering. He had known about the arrangement between his father and Chief Elder Ikenna for 2 years. He had not agreed to it, and he had not refused it. He had done what he always did with things that were not yet urgent. He had set it aside and continued working. His father was not an unreasonable man. His father would listen. But Ngozi's arrival meant the matter had been decided somewhere above him, and he had not been consulted, and the thing he had been setting aside was now standing in his courtyard with 6 attendants and 3 chests of cloth. He had been trying to assess her fairly, without prejudice when the accusation happened. He had watched Adaeze walk into the courtyard, and he had seen, in the moment before she understood what she was walking into, the particular stillness of a person who had trained herself not to react. And then he had watched the accusation unfold, and he had felt something cold settle in his chest. The bracelet in the basket was wrong, not morally wrong, practically wrong. In the pattern he had been tracking for 4 months, in the careful small movements of things going missing from exactly the stores Mama Ekwime managed, the appearance of a stolen item in a junior palace girl's basket had the shape of something constructed. He knew it, and he said nothing, not because he believed Ngozi, not because he doubted Adaeze, because in that courtyard, with 2 junior elders and a guard present and a formal accusation already made, speaking would have required a certainty he did not yet have, and Emeka did not speak without certainty. It was the most consistent thing about him. It was also, in this moment, the worst thing about him. He watched Adaeze look at him. He felt the question in it, the clean, direct, wordless question of a person asking, "Are you going to let this happen?" He said nothing. She looked away, and she walked out. He stood in that courtyard for a long time after she left. The elders were speaking. Ngozi was saying something. The guard had set the bracelet on the carved wooden table near the pillar. Emeka was not listening to any of it. He was thinking about the way she had looked at him, not with anger, not with devastation, but with something worse, with the expression of a person who had not been surprised, who had, perhaps, expected exactly this, as though she had always known, at some level, that when the moment came, he would be the one who stayed silent. That thought did not leave him. It followed him through the rest of that day and into the night, sitting beside him in the dark the way a true thing sits when you are trying to ignore it. By the time the oil lamp in his chamber had burned down to almost nothing, he had made a decision. He would find out what had actually happened, not for her. He told himself it was not for her. It was because the pattern was wrong, and he did not leave wrong patterns unexamined. But the lamp knew better, and the dark knew better. And somewhere in the village of Umuoha, walking through the night with coral beads at her throat and her back still straight, Adaeze did not know it yet. Umuoha received Adaeze the way a place receives someone who left and came back changed, not with cruelty, with the particular silence of people who do not know what to say, and fill that silence with extra helpings of food and careful questions about things that do not matter. Her mother said nothing about the palace when Adaeze arrived at the compound gate in the late afternoon. She looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she opened the gate wider and stepped aside and said, "You have not eaten." That was all. They sat together that night in the small kitchen at the back of the compound while the younger children slept. Adaeze's mother did not ask questions. She heated yam porridge and set it down and sat across from her daughter and waited. Adaeze told her everything. Not with tears. The crying was finished. She told it the way you tell something that has already settled into the past, even though it happened that morning with a kind of flat precision that her mother recognized as the voice Adaeze used when she was holding the biggest things the most still. When she finished, her mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Did you take it?" "No," Adaeze said. "Then you did the right thing," her mother said. "A thief defends herself. An innocent woman does not need to." Adaeze looked at the porridge. No one there knew that. "That is their problem," her mother said. "Not yours." Adaeze wanted to believe that. She was trying. Back in the palace of Odumare, Emeka began quietly. He did not announce an investigation. He did not summon anyone. He went, alone, in the early morning before the palace fully woke, to the storage room where Mama Ekwime kept her inventory. Mama Ekwime was already there. She looked up when he entered. She did not look surprised to see him. She looked like a woman who had been expecting a conversation she did not want to have and had decided to be ready for it. "The gold bracelet," Emeka said. Mama Ekwim set down the cloth she was folding. She did not answer immediately. She looked at the wall, then she looked at her hands. "It was in her basket," she said finally. "I know," Emeka said. "I am asking how it came to be there." Another silence. "I do not know," Mama Ekwimi said. Emeka studied her face. He had known Mama Ekwimi since he was a child. He knew the difference between her not knowing and her not saying. "Mama Ekwimi," he said quietly, "I need the truth." She looked at him then, and what he saw in her face was not deception. It was fear, the specific fear of someone who has seen enough of palace politics to know what it costs to speak against a senior elder's family. "I am an old woman," she said. "I have children in this village." "I know," Emeka said. "What I say cannot come back to me," she said. "It will not," Emeka said. She looked at him for a long time, long enough to be deciding something important. Then she said, "The bracelet was in my stores the evening before the accusation. I checked the inventory myself. It was there." Emeka waited. "By morning it was gone," she said, "and then it appeared in that girl's basket." She paused. "I did not move it. Who had access to the stores that night?" Emeka asked. Mama Ekwime looked at the wall again. "I sleep here," she said. "I sleep here and I am old, and I sleep deeply. Anyone who knew that could have come in while I was sleeping." "Anyone," Emeka said, "or someone specific." Mama Ekwime did not answer that question. But she did not need to. Emeka straightened. He thanked her. He left. He stood outside the storage room in the early morning light, and he thought about the 4 months of missing inventory, and the pattern of it, and the timing of Ngozi's arrival, and the bracelet, and Adaeze's face in the courtyard. He had his certainty now. What he did not have was a witness willing to speak publicly. Mama Ekwime had told him what she knew. She would not say it in council, not yet, not with Chief Elder Ekena's family involved. He needed more. In Umuoha, 3 days after Adaeze returned, a man came to her mother's compound. He was not from Odumare. He was older, a trader from the northern road, who had heard through the village network the way all news travels in traditional Igbo country, which is to say quietly and thoroughly, that there was a young woman newly returned from palace service looking for work. He had a proposal. His household needed a capable woman to manage the dry goods store. The pay was fair, the compound was respectable. Adaeze's mother listened to the proposal with the careful attention of a woman who had been managing alone for a long time. That evening she came to where Adaeze was sitting outside and said gently that there was an offer she should consider. Adaeze listened. She did not say yes, she did not say no. She said she would think about it. But her mother recognized the tone. It was the tone Adaeze used when she had already decided and was giving herself time to accept it. The trader would return in 7 days for an answer. If Adaeze said yes, the arrangement would move quickly. A girl with no palace position, no dowry, and a story of dismissal attached to her name could not afford to be slow about respectable offers. Her mother knew this. Adaeze knew this. 7 days. Emeka did not know about the 7 days. He knew Adaeze had gone to Umuoha. The palace network of information was efficient about such things, but he did not know about the trader, or the offer, or the quiet arithmetic her mother was doing. What he knew was that his investigation was moving slowly, that Mama Ekwime would not speak in council without more protection than he could currently offer her, and that Ngozi was continuing to move through the palace with the confidence of a woman who believed she had won. She had taken to organizing the junior palace girls with the authority of someone already in a permanent position. She had twice asked for changes to the household store's schedule. She had, that morning at the breakfast gathering, sat in the chair closest to the seat left for Emeka's future wife. Emeka had watched all of this without reacting, but at night, in his chamber, with the lamp burning low, he kept returning to the same thought. Adaeze had looked at him and asked him a question without words. He had answered it wrong. He did not know yet how to answer it right, but he was beginning to understand that he was running out of time to figure it out. The days in Umuoha had a different texture than the days inside the palace. Inside the palace, time moved by task. You knew where you were in the day by what you were doing. Here, in her mother's compound, time moved by light. Morning light through the palm fronds. Midday heat that pressed down on everything. The long gold of late afternoon, then dark. Adaeze filled the time with work because she did not know what else to do with herself. She helped her mother carry water. She mended cloth. She sat with her youngest sibling in the evenings and taught the child to count using dried palm kernels. She did all of this with the focused attention of a woman trying to build a wall between herself and a feeling she had not yet named. It was not grief, exactly. It was something that sat beneath grief. The feeling of having almost had something, not just a position, not just security, but something more interior than that, and watching it become impossible before it was ever real. She had never told anyone about Emeka. There was nothing to tell, nothing had happened, and yet the nothing of it had weight. The not speaking of it had weight. And now she was carrying the weight of a thing that had never existed, which is in some ways harder to put down than the weight of something real. She did not talk about any of this. She carried water and mended cloth and counted palm kernels with her sibling. On the fourth day, her mother's sister came to visit. Her mother's sister was a direct woman who believed that silence about difficult things was the same as agreeing with them. She sat across from Adaeze in the afternoon shade and said, without introduction, "People in the village are talking." Adaeze looked at her. "Let them," she said. "They are saying you were dismissed for theft," her mother's sister said. "That is not a small thing here. People's daughters are arranged into households from this village. A story like that follows a girl." "The story is not true," Adaeze said. "I know it is not true," her mother's sister said, "but the people saying it do not care what is true. They care what was said publicly in a palace courtyard." Adaeze was quiet. "Your mother has had an offer," her mother's sister continued. "The trader from the northern road is a decent man. His compound is known." This is the kind of thing that closes a story like the one following you. "I have 7 days to decide," Adaeze said. 6 now, her mother's sister said. "And I am asking you not to waste them." She left before Adaeze could answer. Adaeze sat in the shade for a long time after that. Not thinking. Just sitting. Letting the weight of what had been said settle into whatever space was left in her. She thought about her mother's face on the night she returned. She thought about the 3 younger children. She thought about what a story like the one following her could do to her siblings' futures if it grew long enough. She had been trained not to be selfish with her suffering. She picked up the cloth she had been mending. She kept her hands moving. Back in Odumare, Emeka was running into walls. Mama Ekwime would tell him nothing more until he could guarantee her safety. He understood why. He could not blame her. But guaranteeing her safety meant confronting Chief Elder Ikena's family formally, and confronting them formally without a public witness was the kind of move that could split the Elder Council in 2. His father still did not know any of this. Emeka had been holding the investigation close because he had wanted to bring his father a complete truth, not a complicated half-truth that would require the king to choose sides before the evidence was settled. But the longer he waited, the more Ngozi consolidated her position in the palace, and the more the version of events where Adaeze was a thief became the official version. He went to his father on the 5th day. He told him about the inventory discrepancies. He told him about the bracelet. He did not say Ngozi's name. He said there was reason to believe the accusation against the palace girl had been constructed. His father listened the way old kings listen, without interrupting, without changing expression, weighing everything. When Emeka finished, his father was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Why are you telling me this now?" Emeka met his father's eyes. "Because I waited too long," he said. His father studied him. The king was not a man who missed things. He had not missed the way his son had been positioning himself near the household stores for months. He had not missed, before Ngozi's arrival, the particular quality of his son's attention when a certain palace girl moved through the palace corridors. "The girl is in Umuoha," the king said. It was not a question. "Yes," Emeka said. "And you want to bring her back," the king said. "I want to clear her name," Emeka said carefully. His father looked at him for a long time. Then he said something that Emeka did not expect. "Ikena's family has held the eastern trade route for 30 years, the king said. "If I move against them without ironclad proof, I lose that alliance and I lose 2 elders who will follow Ikena. You understand what I am telling you?" "I understand," Emeka said. "Then you understand," his father said, "that I need more than what you have given me before I can do anything officially." Emeka stood up. "I know," he said. "I am asking for 3 more days." His father looked at him. 3 days, he said. "And Emeka," he paused. "Whatever this is, make sure you know what it is before you act on it. A king's son does not pursue a palace girl out of guilt. That is not justice. That is something else." Emeka walked out of his father's chamber. He stood in the corridor and he thought about what his father had said. And he thought about the difference between guilt and something else. And he thought about whether, in his case, there was actually a difference at all. He was not sure. What he was sure of was this: Adaeze had not taken that bracelet. And she had been sent out of the palace that housed her and stripped of the only position she had in the world, and she had walked out without a word, with her back straight and her coral beads at her throat, and he had stood in that courtyard and let it happen. He was not going to stand still anymore. He called for his horse. He did not go to Umuoha that night. He went back to Mama Ekwima. He sat across from her in the storage room, and he did not ask her questions this time. He told her what he had found in the inventory records. He told her about the pattern of disappearances. He told her that the investigation had been running for 4 months and that what had happened to Adaeze was connected to it. And then he told her something he had not told his father. He told her that if she spoke publicly, he would personally guarantee her safety and the safety of her family. Not as the king's son making a political promise, as a man who was telling her directly, in this room, that he would not let her carry this alone. Mama Ekwem looked at him for a long time. "You should have spoken in that courtyard," she said. "I know," Emeka said. "That girl walked out of here with nothing," Mama Ekwimi said, "because you were silent." "I know," Emeka said again. She looked at her hands. 5 days I have been carrying this," she said quietly. 5 days of seeing that child's empty sleeping place and knowing what I know." She looked up at him. "I will speak," she said, "but not in a council room where Ikena's men can look at me. I will speak at the ancestral shrine, on sacred ground, where a lie carries consequences that no elder wants." Emeka nodded. "The ancestral shrine," he said. "I will arrange it." "And the girl," Mama Ekwimi said. "You need to bring her back yourself. Not a messenger, not a palace guard, you." Emeka stood up. "I know," he said. He left the storage room and walked through the palace corridors and out into the night. The harmattan had eased slightly. The air tasted of dry earth and the distant smoke of cooking fires from the village below. He had 3 days. He needed to get to Umuoha before the answer was given to the trader from the northern road. He did not yet know he had 2. Mama Ekwime did not sleep that night. She sat in her storage room with a small clay lamp and she looked at the walls around her. The walls she had kept for 22 years, the shelves she had stocked and restocked through 3 dry seasons and 2 floods, and the births and deaths of more palace inhabitants than she could count. And she thought about what it meant to have stayed silent for 5 days. She had told herself it was prudence. She was an old woman. She had children. The power of Chief Elder Ikena's family was real, and it was close, and it did not forgive. But, sitting in the lamplight, she allowed herself to think about Adaeze. Not about the injustice of it in the abstract, about Adaeze specifically. About the girl who had come to this palace at 19 with 2 braid ends and coral beads, and a quality of stillness that Mama Ekwime had recognized immediately as the stillness of someone who had learned very young that the world would not be fair to her and had decided to be excellent anyway. About the girl who swept the corridor twice. About the girl who had stood in that courtyard and been called a thief, and had not flinched, and had not begged, and had simply stated, once, in a level voice, "I did not take it." Mama Equime picked up the lamp. She went to the back of the storage room, to the shelf behind the large grain jars, and she moved 3 jars aside. Behind them, wrapped in old cloth, was a small calabash. She opened it. Inside was a piece of folded palm leaf, old, dry. Written on it, in the faded script of a palace recorder who had been dead for 10 years, was an inventory entry. A record of the gold bracelet being signed out of the treasury for a formal occasion, and signed back in by Mama Equime herself, with a date and a witness signature. She had kept it because she kept everything. Because 22 years of palace service had taught her that records were the only things that could not be argued with. She wrapped it back in its cloth. She would bring it to the ancestral shrine. Meanwhile, in the palace courtyard, Ngozi was making her second mistake. The first mistake had been underestimating how much Emeka paid attention. The second was overestimating how well she had hidden the first. Her trusted attendant, the one who had moved the bracelet, had been spending the past 5 days in the grip of a fear that grew slightly larger every morning. She was not a cruel woman. She had done what Ngozi had asked because Ngozi had been her patron for 3 years, and that was what loyalty meant in her world. But she had not fully understood, before doing it, what it would feel like afterward. It felt bad. It felt bad in the specific way that things feel bad when you have watched someone walk out of a gate with nothing, knowing you put the thing in their basket. On the 6th morning, the attendant went to find Emeka. She did not go to the palace guard room. She did not send a message. She walked to the corridor outside Emeka's private chamber, and she stood there, and when he came out, she said, "I need to tell you something." She told him everything. She was shaking by the time she finished. Emeka listened without interrupting. When she was done, he asked her 2 questions. Could she say this again at the ancestral shrine, before the elders? And did she understand what it would mean for her position in Ngozi's household? She said yes to the first question. She said she understood the second. Emeka looked at her for a moment. "You did a wrong thing," he said, "and you are doing the right thing now. Both of those are true at the same time." The attendant nodded. She left. Emeka stood in the corridor. He had his witness. He had Mama Equime's testimony. He had the inventory record. He had everything he needed. He called for his horse. He rode to Umuoha on the morning of the 6th day. He did not bring attendants. He did not send word ahead. He rode alone on the red dust road between Odumare and Umuoha, with the early sun at his back, and the harmattan lifting small clouds of dry earth around the horse's legs. He did not know exactly what he was going to say. He knew what he was not going to say. He was not going to explain himself in a way that made his silence in the courtyard sound like strategy. He was not going to offer her palace position back, as though it were a gift he was giving her. He was not going to speak first about the investigation or the evidence or what was going to happen at the ancestral shrine. He was going to say the thing that was true before any of that. Adaeze was at the well behind her mother's compound when she heard the horse. She did not look up immediately. Horses passed through Umuoha. It was a road village. Horses were not unusual. Then she heard her younger sibling's voice from the compound gate, high and startled, saying a name. She looked up. Emeka was dismounting at the gate. He was alone. No palace colors. No formal cloth. Just a man who had ridden a long road in the early morning and had dust on his arms and was looking at her across the compound yard with the expression of someone who had rehearsed what to say and had already decided to abandon the rehearsal. Adaeze set down the water vessel. She did not move toward him. He walked across the compound. He stopped a respectful distance away. He looked at her. "I should have spoken," he said. "No introduction, no title, just that." Adaeze looked at him. Her face was still, not cold. still the kind of stillness that covers a great deal. "You should have," she said. "I know what happened," he said. "I know who moved the bracelet and how. I have testimony, I have a witness, I have a record from the treasury." He paused. "I am going to the ancestral shrine tomorrow. I am asking you to come." "To do what?" Adaeze asked. "To stand in the place where the truth is being told," he said. "Not for me, for yourself. Because you said you did not take it, and you were right, and the people who watched you walk out of that courtyard need to hear it said where it cannot be denied." Adaeze was quiet, and after, she said, he looked at her directly. "That is your choice to make," he said, "not mine." She looked at him for a long moment. She was reading the thing behind the thing. She had always been able to do that, even when she wished she could not. What she read in him was not guilt performing as justice. It was something simpler. A man who had been careful his whole life, and had been careful at the wrong moment, and was now standing in a compound in Umuoha with dust on his arms, because being careful from a distance was no longer something he was willing to do. She picked up the water vessel. "I will tell my mother," she said. They arrived at the ancestral shrine the following morning before the sun was fully up. The shrine of Odumare sat at the edge of the palace grounds, where the old neem trees grew in a half-circle around a carved wooden platform. It was used for oath-taking, for formal disputes, for the kind of truth-telling that needed the weight of the ancestors to make it real. Elders did not lie at the ancestral shrine, not because they were always honest, but because they believed, in the specific way that people who have watched others die believe, that certain places carried consequences. Emeka had sent word the night before. The gathering was not optional. Chief Elder Ikenna arrived with 2 elder witnesses and the expression of a man who had not yet decided how much he knew. Ngozi arrived after him, in formal cloth, her face arranged carefully. Adaeze arrived with her mother. She wore the indigo wrap she had taken with her from the palace, her coral beads, her hair wrapped simply. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who had been brought low by a lie and had not changed her posture because of it. Mama Ekwime was already at the shrine when they arrived. She was sitting on the wooden platform with the calabash in her lap and the folded palm leaf in her hands, and the expression of a woman who had decided, in the dark of the previous night, that 22 years of keeping records meant something. Emeka opened the gathering with the formal words. He did not speak long. He said there had been an accusation. He said new testimony had come forward. He said the ancestral shrine was the right place for it. Then he nodded to the attendant. She stepped forward. She was still shaking, but her voice was steady. She told the gathering what she had done. She named Ngozi. She named the night. She described where she had placed the bracelet and what she had been instructed to do. She did not embellish. She did not excuse herself. She stated the facts in the flat, careful way of someone who understands they are about to lose something and has decided the losing is worth it. When she finished, the shrine was silent. Mama Ekwime stood. She held up the palm leaf record. She read the inventory entry aloud. The bracelet, signed in, the date. Her witness signature. The date of the accusation was 2 days after the bracelet had been assigned back into her care. She set the record down on the platform. "I have kept this for 22 years, she said. "I should have spoken 6 days ago. I did not." She looked at Adaeze. "I am sorry," she said. "I am saying it now." Adaeze met her eyes. She nodded once. Chief Elder Ikenna had not spoken. He was looking at his daughter with the specific expression of a man who has built something carefully for a long time and is watching it come apart. Ngozi's face had changed. The careful arrangement of it had slipped. Underneath was something younger and more frightened than what she usually showed. Emeka looked at her. "You moved against an innocent woman," he said. His voice was not raised. It did not need to be. "You used your position here to construct an accusation, and you used testimony to carry it. And you did it in this palace, on these grounds, before elders and a guard." He paused. "I am not calling for punishment," he said. I am calling for truth, and the truth is this. The alliance between this palace and Chief Elder Ikena's family was built on an agreement of honor. What was done here was not honorable. He looked at Ikena. That is for the Elder Council to weigh. Ikena said nothing. Ngozi said nothing. The two elder witnesses looked at each other. Adaeze stood at the edge of the platform, and she did not feel triumph exactly. She felt something quieter. The specific satisfaction of a thing being made right that was not the same as it becoming easy. The bracelet had been in her basket. The accusation had been public. That morning had happened and could not unhappen. But the truth was now in the place where it could not be covered, and the people who had watched her walk out of that courtyard were present to hear it. That was enough. The Elder Council deliberated for 2 days. Chief Elder Ikena did not fight the finding. He was a political man. He understood the mathematics of his situation with the clarity of someone who had been doing palace arithmetic for 40 years. Fighting an ancestral shrine testimony with 2 corroborating witnesses and a written record would cost him more than accepting it. The betrothal arrangement between his family and the palace of Odumare was formally dissolved. Ngozi returned to her father's compound with her 6 attendants and her 3 chests of cloth. She did not speak publicly about what had happened, neither did her father. In Odumare and in the villages that traded with it, the story moved the way true stories move quietly and completely until everyone knew the shape of it. Adaeze's name was cleared in the same gathering where the dissolution was announced. The palace recorder entered it formally. The record of the accusation was struck from the official account. What remained was simply the inventory entry in Mama Ekwima's hand and the testimony that corrected it. Small, clean, permanent. Adaeze did not return to the palace as a palace girl. There was a conversation between Emeka and his father that lasted most of one afternoon. There was a separate conversation between the king and Adaeze's mother that Adaeze was not present for. There were formalities that needed to be observed because in Odumare, as in all traditional Igbo kingdoms, the path between where things were and where they were going had to be walked correctly. Adaeze understood this. She had been raised to understand that the right ending arrived through the right process, not around it. She waited. Emeka found her on the evening of the 3rd day after the shrine gathering, sitting outside Mama Ekwima's storage room in the spot where they had shared pepper soup and silence for 3 years. He sat beside her without asking. They were quiet for a while. "Your father's decision?" Adaeze said finally. "He said the same thing he always says when I have already decided something," Emeka said. "That I should make sure I know what I am doing." "And do you?" Adaeze asked. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. Adaeze looked at the sky. The harmattan had fully lifted, the air was clear, and the stars were out in the specific abundance that only comes after the dry season haze breaks. "I swept this corridor twice every morning," she said. "I know," he said. "I watched you." She looked at him then. "For how long?" "Long enough to know that when you walk into a room, I know where you are without looking for you," he said. Adaeze was quiet for a moment. "That is a strange thing to know about someone," she said. "I know," he said. She looked back at the sky. "I almost said yes to the trader," she said. "I know that too," he said. "I rode faster because of it." She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. They were not together because anyone gave permission. They were together because the truth had been laid down in the place where it could not be covered. And what the truth said was this: there had never been a reason to keep them apart except a lie. And the lie was gone. If you have listened this far, you already know that this story is not really about a bracelet. It is about what it costs to stay silent when you know the truth. And it is about what it costs to carry someone else's silence when it lands on you. Emeka paid for his silence, not lightly, not quickly. He paid it in the 6 days he spent dismantling what his silence had built, and in the dust on his arms on the road to Umuoha, and in sitting beside a woman who had every reason not to trust him and choosing to be present anyway instead of just correct. Adaeze paid for it too. She paid in the way all innocent people pay for lies that are told about them not in guilt, but in the exhausting work of remaining whole while someone else tries to define you as broken. She remained whole. That is worth saying clearly. She went to that courtyard and she was accused, and she said once, in a level voice, what was true. And then she walked out, and she kept walking, and she stayed whole. If you were Adaeze in that courtyard, with the bracelet in your basket, and the elders watching, and the man you had quietly allowed yourself to feel something for standing silent, what would you have done? Would you have fought? Would you have named her? Would you have looked at him the way she looked at him? One long question without words, and then turned and walked out with your back straight. I think about that question. I think there is no answer that does not cost something. But I think Adaeze chose the one thing she could keep after everything else was taken. She chose her own dignity. She refused to bargain for her innocence in a room that had already decided. And in the end, the truth came looking for her. It always does when you give it time. Where are you watching from today? Drop your country in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, if you felt Adaeze walking out of that courtyard, and you felt Emeka riding that dusty road, and you stayed all the way here, then you already know what this channel is. Subscribe. There are more stories where this one came from, and they are all waiting for you.